Alright, P6 is still going to be about rational expressions. We're on part 2 now. Last video was all about multiplying, dividing their domains, and simplifying them. Today we're going to talk about how to add and subtract when they have common denominators and also when they don't have common denominators. And we're going to find the LCD, which we need when we talk about common denominators, and also next section when we start to talk about solving them. So jumping into it, if we are going to add and subtract rational expressions when they do have common denominators, first thing we're going to do is just combine like terms in the numerator, leave the denominator alone, just like you would normally do a fraction. So in this case, we can combine like terms since our denominators are the same. We can combine like terms in the numerator, so 5x and 4x is going to give us 9x, 1 and 2 is going to give us 3, and then leave your denominator alone. And now you also will want to be careful to make sure there isn't anything that can cancel out, and in this case there won't be anything that can cancel out. So this one we are done. Okay, now the little more difficult is when we have different denominators, when they don't have the same denominators. So our first step is to find the lowest common denominator, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. Once we have the lowest common denominator, we can rewrite the expression with the lowest common denominator, combine the numerators over your LCD, and simplify as possible. So the hardest thing, once we find the LCD, it's just like the last slide. What we need to do first, though, is learn how to find the lowest common denominator. So what we're going to do is factor all denominators completely. So for every term we factor the denominators. We're going to list all distinct factors of the first denominator, combine that with all the distinct factors of each remaining denominator, and then finally that resulting product, that resulting list, which is going to be a multiplication, is your lowest common denominator. So what I mean by that, if I take my first one here, I am going to look at 5x squared plus 15x, and I'm going to factor that completely. So I can take out my greatest common factor from this one, which is 5x, and I end up with x plus 3 on the inside. I take my other denominator, x squared plus 6x plus 9, and I need to factor that completely. And what that's going to give me is x plus 3 and x plus 3, which tells us then that our lowest common denominator from them, we factored each one completely. We're going to list all the factors of our first denominator, so 5x and x plus 3, and then all the distinct factors of our second one. Now this is where it can get a little tricky because we see one x plus 3 in there, but we don't have two x plus 3s. So this is already there because it's right here. What we need then is our other x plus 3. Okay, so now that we've found our lowest common denominator, we need to create fractions that we can find the sum of. So what that means is we're going to take our first fraction, 7 over, and I'm going to write it in factored form, 5x and x plus 3, plus we're going to have our second one, which is 9 over x plus 3, x plus 3. Okay, and remember we just found our LCD, so we need to add to each one of these fractions the pieces we don't have from that LCD. So you notice on this first one, what we need is another x plus 3. Now we can't just write it in the numerator. Oh, I'm sorry, we can't just write it in the denominator. Really, it's like multiplying by 1 when we did rationalizing the denominators. We also need it in the numerator. So we've multiplied by 1 but created our lowest common denominator. Over here, we're close already. We have the x plus 3's already. We need the 5x. And likewise, we need to multiply the numerator by 5x as well, thus multiplying by 1. So now it turns into just like the last slide. We're going to leave everything over our one denominator, our LCD, and I'm going to rewrite the numerator as one sum of these two. Now we need to simplify a little bit and create like terms, or combine our like terms in the top as we can. So we need to distribute that 7, which will give us 7x plus 21, plus 9 times 5 is going to give us 45x, all over continuing with our lowest common denominator. Okay, Okay, and then the last step now, we just need to combine like terms. So 7x and 45x is going to give us a 52x plus 21 all over our LCD, which is 5x and x plus 3 and x plus 3. Okay, and that would be the sum when we don't have a common denominator. We had to create a common denominator. So what I want you to do for tomorrow, in addition to the questions you already should have answered, is think about this problem. So this is one place where rational expressions are actually used in the real world. You know, when we talk about inoculating populations, like we've inoculated for smallpox, it used to be a huge thing, and inoculation for rabies for animals, that kind of thing. There are a ton of difference. Let's look at cost evaluations, and this is a model that companies and the government actually uses when we start talking about inoculation costs of the world. All right, so answer these questions. We're going to start class with this next session.